Hi everyone, and welcome to this Google EDU on Air. My name is Jennie Magiera, and I'm the Global Head of Education Impact here at Google for Education. Today we're going to be talking about creating interactive video lessons with G Suite. I'm really excited to share these tips and tricks with you and take you step by step through how you can create your own original interactive instructional content for your students. What we're going to do today is go through a mix of slides to give you ideas, tips, and strategies, and then I'm actually going to screen share with you and show you click by click how to do this. So something that you'll want to do is make sure that you come back to this archive video after this is done so that you can have two windows open and move along with me. If you feel like you can keep up right now, you might want to open another tab with your Google Drive and be ready to create forms, create slides, and play as we go. And we'll do kind of like an I do, we do, you do. So with that being said, let's go ahead and dive in. I want to make sure that for all of you who are joining me for the first time, you're aware of where we archive and curate lots of resources around distance learning at Google for Education. And those are two websites that work in parallel with one another. The first is the Teach from Home website that we created in partnership with UNESCO. And this is a site for easy to access, beginner level content around distance learning and G Suite and Chrome tools. So if you're that educator who looks at technology and you break out into like full body hives and feel like a deep level anxiety trying these things out, or you're working with one of those colleagues, then Teach from Home is the right place for you. It's simple, it's clean, and it's easy to navigate. If you have any experience with technology or you're willing to learn and you feel like, all right, I can do this, maybe you are an expert or maybe you're not. Maybe you're just someone who feels ready to take the dive. Then the second website, the EDU COVID-19 resource page, is a great place to begin. This one has a lot of entry-level content as well, but it has a lot more content and goes much more deeply into the strategies and pedagogies of how to unpack distance learning as a classroom practitioner or as an education leader. These tools and trainings go a lot further depth than like the step-by-step how-to on how to enable and execute this type of teaching and learning, and it's a lot more complex. So if you're ready to dig deeper and you want to really level up, then that second site for you, the g.co/edu/COVID-19 is a much more in-depth website. And if you just want simple, surface level, easy to access content, then that Teach from Home site is the best one for you. So I'll just let you take a minute to screenshot those or type down those URLs for you. And then I have some colleagues who are my wizards behind the curtain right now, fellow Googlers, who are live on the chat that you can see at the bottom. If you just scroll down, you'll see there's a live chat where you can ask the question. They're answering your questions live. Please keep them coming, and I'll be sure to answer some questions as we finish up this EDU on air. Speaking of that live chat, I want to use it right now. So before we begin, I want to take a pause and a minute of breath. And the reason why I want to do this is to acknowledge the complexity of what we're going through as a global society. You know what, we keep hearing phrases right now like unprecedented and pandemic, really anxiety producing and stress inducing verbiage and incidents happening within our communities and worldwide society. This is hard for us as an adult. This is really hard for our students as well, both for those who understand the complexities of what's going on and for those who are just hearing and internalizing the stress and anxiety that we have as the adults in the room, both either virtual or face-to-face. So I want to make sure whenever we're designing instructional content for our students that we begin and end acknowledging the whole student, that we know that we need to teach everything about them. I have a really good friend and colleague, Chris Lehman out of Philadelphia Public Schools, who says that we need to teach students first and subjects second. And I believe that with my whole body and soul as well. And we want to make sure that we are acknowledging that this is difficult for our students, that their circumstances are wide ranging, and that we're acknowledging their needs as well. And I want to model this by doing this with you right now. So before I begin any instructional content with my students during this time, and in this case, my students are all of you out there in the Eduverse, I want to take a moment to hear how you're doing as people. And so I'm going to do something that I did in my classroom every single day throughout my career, which is a mood check-in. And there are a lot of different ways to do mood check-ins. You can do a Google form where students can check off the emotions they're feeling, set goals for the day, even request conferences with their teacher. But to do this, I want to do very simply using the chat that we have here. And we're going to do a quick exercise called glows and grows. And this is something that you can begin your video lessons with as well. And it could be asynchronous. It doesn't have to be a live chat like this. It could be a discussion that students jump into at any time. Or again, it could be a Google form or even a Google Doc where they can jump in and add their thoughts to a table. In the chat there, I'd like you to state a glow. And you can just write glow and a colon or a glow and a dash. And that's something to smile about, something that made you smile today, this week, over the weekend. And if you feel comfortable sharing a grow, something that you're struggling with. And if you don't feel comfortable sharing a grow in this forum, you can leave it at glow. Or if you just want to be what I call a viewer or a consumer and not participate and just view, that's okay as well. Do whatever you feel comfortable with. But let's take a moment to acknowledge our humanity and see a glow and a grow. So I'm just going to take a moment to pause and let you go ahead and do that. And I see a lot of people sharing hellos and saying hi's. Folks already asking lots of questions. I also see some folks saying that the sound is a little bit funky, so hopefully the sound is better for you now. Thank you, Marcia, for sharing a glow. She has an amazing community of educators. I can't agree more. I've been so inspired by seeing my colleagues stepping up and doing really incredible and creative instruction over the past couple weeks and months. Also, Amy, I agree. She glows that her children have grown so much closer during this hard time. I have one child. I have an 18-month-old named Lucy, and I'm deeply grateful for this time that I get to spend with her. A grow for me would be I am not a preschool teacher or an early education teacher, and I am really struggling with how do you keep an 18-month-old happy and occupied and growing when they're spending 24/7 in a tiny little apartment in downtown Chicago. So I'm glowing about the resources that my colleagues are sharing and growing in that, woof, hats off to all of you who work with littles all day long. So thank you for all of you who are sharing these glows and grows. Please continue to share. And I think that what I really am trying to model here is as we're beginning our instruction with our students to always remember what they're going through and giving them a pause to be human, to be that whole student and acknowledging all parts of them, even beyond the standards that we're trying to help them master in that lesson. So with that being said, let's continue on. And what we're going to do today is here's the agenda for activities. So first, we're going to get to know our medium to understand how are you creating these videos. And then we're also going to take a moment to think about how to create the lesson and step-by-step, how do you create your lesson in this medium. We're going to show you how step-by-step to create two different types of assessments, one that's a quicker and easier assessment, and one that's a little bit more high level and deeper to get into the weeds of what your students are understanding and synthesizing. We'll talk a little bit about how to post your lesson, then finally, a few quick tips for sustaining this practice. So let's start with knowing your medium. Now, there's a lot of different ways to create video lessons, and all of these different platforms have lots of strengths and are really great. But for those of you who want to leverage G Suite tools because they're free, they're easy to access, and it's not another app you need to sign up for, here's a way to do it using only G Suite tools. So one way to do this is just by using Google Hangouts Meet, which you all have access to right now during this COVID-19 crisis. So the way that you're going to do that is by meeting with yourself. And that's not a slip of a tongue. It's a pun intended, literally creating a Google Meet and joining it yourself. Let me show you what I mean. So what I like to do for this is one of two things. Now, let's say you just want to use slides. If all you want to do is Google Slides, then all you need to do is just start a Meet. You can do that by going to meets.google.com. Really simple, and I'll show you that right now. I can just go here and go to meets.google.com. I'm sorry, meet.google.com, singular. And it lets me join or start a meeting. So I can just click join or start a meeting, and I don't even have to do a calendar invite. I can call demo meeting and click continue. And it'll allow me to just create a meeting right here. Hello, and I can click join now, and boom, I'm in a meeting, and I can just present my screen now. So I can click present now. I can either do my whole screen or I can do a window. So a window will, not allow everyone to see my desktop if I don't want them to see, my background or my icons, which is nice. So I can just click here, present now, and then I could just select a window. So I'm going to select my Chrome window here, and then I can just show my slides. And as I'm showing my slides, it will literally show it on my screen in real time, and I can record it. So what's really nice about that as well is I'm able to record what I have going on my screen as well. So then I have the ability not just to be showing my screen and having folks see what I'm doing, but then I can record that and create a video file for posterity, which is quite nice. The other thing that you want to think about as you do this is sometimes you want to move beyond the slides. It's not enough to just have the slide presentation that you have going, but you also want to be showing some handwritten work. Now, there's a couple of different ways to do this. You can use Google Jamboard, which is a really great tool to be able to have an interactive whiteboard and allow your users to see what you're doing in real time and have that annotation, which I really, really appreciate. Another thing that you can do, though, is if you don't feel comfortable with drawing on the screen in real time and you need a little bit more support, you can also have the ability to do kind of like a dot cam in real time, which is really nice as well. And I'll show you how to do that now. So if you want to do a dot cam, and Jess, I think that I dropped out of the StreamYard on my Chromebook, so if you don't mind adding my Chromebook, which just joined again so I can share my screen back up. So what you can do to do a makeshift dot cam is by just taking your phone and joining the Hangout live as well. And Jess, do you see me back in the broadcast here from my other device? I should be back in. I have a second device that I just logged in here. And I believe that I am sharing my screen. Wait for it now. So hopefully you see me there, and we'll get this second device back on the screen. So just for those of you, here we go, who are watching live and don't see what's going on, I have 3 devices going right now so I can show you the behind the scenes of how I'm building this. So it's a bit complex, but for those of you at home, when you're actually recording, it's very, very simple. So you just need your computer, whether it's a laptop, a phone, a laptop, a tablet, a desktop, and your phone. And what you're going to want to do is get your paper and marker that you would just be drawing on, or you can, if you have a slate or a whiteboard, you could use that as well. And a tall cup or a narrow box. And the tall cup or narrow box is going to be your stand. If you actually have a tripod or a stand, that's even better. I don't happen to have one at home, so I just got a tall water glass. And the height's what's really important there. Then what I did is I just took my phone and I put it on top of the water glass with the camera facing down. And then I was able to be very careful as you place it, by the way, and make sure your cup is empty. Don't use the cup that you were drinking out of that's full of soda pop or water or coffee, because you don't want any phone emergencies where it falls into some liquid. That's definitely not good. And then you just join your Meet, your Google Meet from your device. So you can invite yourself, you can text yourself the link, email yourself the link, put it in a Google Doc that you can click on. However you want to get the link to your phone, start the Hangout Meet on your computer, get the link to your phone and join it. And then once you join it, then now you're in this Hangout Meet and you're literally meeting with yourself. You'll reverse the camera by going to the settings and just switch the camera so it's rear facing and not forward facing, so it's looking down. And now you can see that you can see what's on the phone on my computer screen. So you mute the microphone and mute the sound of the computer so you don't get feedback. It's really important that you don't get feedback. So you're going to mute the mic and the sound from the computer so you're only getting sound from your phone. And then if you want to, you can put a counterbalance like a book or something heavy and flat on the base of the phone so that it doesn't fall off as you're going. And then what you get is this. So you can see here, now I have a dot cam. I was able to record this because I was on a Google Hangout meet with myself, and I was literally meeting with myself and recording myself as I was drawing. And this is all coming off of my phone. So you can see in the upper corner here that this is a Hangout. You can see here I'm meeting with myself, and I'm just going. And I apologize for my unmanicured fingers. My hands aren't looking their best these days, as you can imagine. I figured this out because as a new parent, I realized that I was at a family member's home and I didn't have my baby monitor with me when my daughter was napping. And I was like, how am I going to watch my daughter? And I realized that I could put my phone next to her crib and create a baby monitor by doing a meet with myself and literally doing this like hangout meet with myself, watching my daughter. I created a baby monitor, which is essentially a very similar thing to a dot cam. So that's how you can create yourself recording your own handwriting if you don't want to use Jamboard or a digital whiteboard. Now, another thing that you want to think about through all of this is just making sure that you are understanding what the possibilities of using either paper analog, handwriting out your lesson, the Jamboard of doing a digital lesson on a digital whiteboard, or creating Google Slides that you click through, and what the difference between all of those are. Because as you're creating your lesson, you really want to know what the beginning and end of it looks like. Otherwise, you don't know what to create, and it's hard to understand what you do or do not want to do. So for example, you can see here, oh, there's my doorbell. This is happening live, everybody. As you can see here, this is an example of me recording a Hangout with myself. So I'm going to meets.google.com. I'm clicking join or start a meeting. I'm just calling it math lesson. And then I'm joining the meeting here. Then the next thing I'm doing is going down to the bottom right-hand corner to those three little dots, or to the little present now, and I'm presenting a window. Again, you can see I have all the different options. Then I'm selecting the window that I want to show a screencast, and that is selecting the Chrome window. And I already have my slides up. So here are my Google Slides that I pre-created, and I'm sharing them. And now I'm able to go through and show the lesson. Now, some cool things with slides is there's this laser pointer tool, so I can use it to, point to the different parts of my screen. I have Q&A. I can also do live closed captions. So I can say, wow, this is so cool. There are some subtitles in this slide. Woohoo, woohoo, yay. And you know what else? Math rules. Now you can see here that not all of what I'm saying is transcribed perfectly, so it's not foolproof. Rules, just typed out as rules, but it's still something really helpful. I can also use that interactive Jamboard, as I mentioned, to create that interactive virtual whiteboard space. And later in this EDU on Air, I'll show you how that looks. So now that we know our medium, it's time to create our lesson. And there's a couple different things that you might want to do as you are creating your lesson. So I hear, let me pause from when I hear that my sound is muffled. Jess, if you still are having audio issues, please let me know, but hopefully that's better. Just doing a little bit of adjusting here as we go. But, oh, great. Better now. So apologies for any audio issues. But the next thing we want to do is start actually lesson planning. So now we know how we're going to give our lesson. We're going to do a Hangout meet with ourselves. We can screencast our screen or share our screen to share the slides, Jamboard, or an actual piece of paper or whiteboard that we're drawing on. So what are we actually going to teach? Well, there's a couple steps of this process. The first one is determining your content, which is the same we all do as educators, no matter what. What am I teaching today? Then The thing that's slightly different is we're going to actually chunk the content by sub-goal. So what you'd normally teach in a face-to-face lesson, we're going to chunk it down into mini lessons. Then we're going to write the assignment. And for those of you who are familiar with backwards design, this is going to be very similar, where we start with the assessment. Then what we're going to do is plan for interaction. And in video lessons, you want to have as much interaction as possible. What I'm doing right now in this lesson is not best practice. Me speaking to you or speaking at you for 45 minutes, 60 minutes is not what I would recommend for your students. But given the platform of EDU on Air, this is how we normally do this kind of learning, but I would recommend something different for your students. So do as I say, not as I do. Next up, you want to prep your materials and get them all ready before you hit record. And finally, yes, you want to record your video. So let's start with number one, determining your content. So ask yourself, what is it that you're teaching next? What is it that you want to teach your students? And if you were going to teach them face-to-face, how would you be teaching it? So if I were going into my classroom on Monday and teaching, Unit 7 on surface area, or Unit 5 on main idea and details, what would it be how would I teach that to my students in a 30, 45, 60-minute lesson? What still works about that? So what can I still do? Because I know my medium. I know that I can create Google Slides. I know that I can use a Jamboard, which is like a virtual whiteboard, or I can just draw it on a piece of paper. What am I still able to do knowing I have those 3 platforms to teach from? So for example, let's say my lesson is around solving problems in the 4 operations. I'm teaching a grade 2 math lesson, and I'm trying to think about patterns in arithmetic and how it relates, to other operations. I might have done this classically in my classroom by standing in front of a group of students at my dry erase board and drawing out some problems on the board. Maybe I had some anchor charts. Maybe I was lucky enough to have an interactive whiteboard, and I was able to use that interactive whiteboard to show students what I was doing. And so I was actually creating digital slides for each day's lesson. So I was already doing that. Maybe I had bags of manipulatives. I had my plastic baggies full of base 10 blocks that I would pass out to my students. Which of those things can I still do in this virtual space? I can probably still teach at the board, because as I just said, with our Jamboard G Suite tool or our analog piece of paper on our table, I can approximate a whiteboard. If I was already doing digital slides using an interactive whiteboard in my classroom, like a Promethean or Smartboard, I can do that because I have Google Slides. I can still create slides. The manipulatives might be a little bit more challenging. Maybe you didn't have time before your school closed to send your students home with baggies of base 10 blocks. Can you approximate that given what they have in their house? Is it reasonable to ask students to take 100 counters or 20 counters of coins or dice or marbles or something they have in their home? Knowing your students' culture, climate, situation at home, is that something they'll have access to easily without being able to go to the store? So some questions to ask yourself. Now that you think about what you were going to teach and how you were going to teach it and what can stay the same, now it's time to think about how to change it as you move to this digital video lesson platform. What you want to do is take that lesson, that 30-minute lesson or 45, 60-minute lesson, and chunk it down by sub-goal. And what I mean by that is there a way to chunk your lesson into subtopics? And you want to chunk it down into, if possible, 3 to maybe 5-minute shorter lessons. The shorter, the better. The reason being is you want to make sure that your students are able to break the lesson down into its parts. In a 60-minute lesson like this EDU on Air, it's going to be hard for you when you watch this archive to jump to the exact topic that you want to learn about. As an adult, maybe you have more dexterity and ability to scrub through the video timeline and fast forward to the exact point you want to rewatch or the piece of information that you don't understand. But for your students at home, a lot of them don't have the fine motor skills to fast forward in a timeline, a video timeline, or the digital knowledge to do it. And some of us as adults struggle with that as well. So it's better to film shorter chunks of content so they can just click on different videos for each subtopic and skip around to what they're struggling with. Attention span is also something that's really hard. We're now 26 minutes into this EDU on air. For some of you, you might be getting antsy. Maybe you've already started checking your email, you're getting up and walking around, you've already paused me. For your students, you want to make sure you're maintaining as much of their attention as possible, so chunking it by sub-goal allows them to have shorter chunks of information. And finally, access to the internet. For our students who don't have equitable access to the internet and to devices, they might not be able to sit in front of a computer for 60 minutes and have 60 minutes of internet access. Maybe they're downloading your videos one at a time. Downloading a 60-minute video can take hours. Downloading a 3-minute video is a lot easier when you're downloading it on mobile data on a parent or guardian's phone or off of a hotspot that you're tethering from a neighbor or a friend. Maybe I'm sharing one device against all of the children in my household. A 5-minute mini lesson means I can take my turn and someone else can be in front of the device later. So chunking it is important for attention span, understanding, and accessibility and equity. So when I take a standard like solving problems with these 4 operations, I can look at what the substandards or the sub-goals are. And even within the sub-goal, take one tiny piece of that and say, this is what I'm going to teach today. And even if that entire substandard or sub-goal would have been one 60-minute lesson, break it down into its minute pieces. Once you've selected what that 3-minute mini lesson is going to be, write your assessment just around that small subtopic goal. That's step 3. And so there are two things to think about when you're writing your assessment, which is what are your outcomes? Same thing we do as educators since the beginning of time. What do I hope my students are learning from this? And then how will I know if they've successfully met that outcome or that goal? What is some evidence that my students can provide to show that they met that lesson outcome? So this number 3, step 3, is nothing different that you ever done as an educator in terms of how you're thinking. What's different perhaps is how you're assessing them. So you can do it a couple different ways. You can do a quick exit ticket, a quick quiz, 1 or 2 questions, maybe 3 through Google Forms. Or you can do a much more in-depth rubric-based task in Google Classroom if you want to do a more performance-based task. Later in this EDU on Air, I'll take you step by step how to do each of these 2 options. Step 4 is to plan for interaction. And this is where you want to make sure you're engaging your students as much as possible. So beyond chunking your lesson into a 3-minute or less video if possible, think about how you can engage your students actively during the video. What I mean by that is maybe the video takes 3 minutes to watch, or it's a 3-minute runtime on the timeline, but maybe it'll actually take your students 5-10 minutes to watch, because you're going to have them pause and do activities throughout the video so that you can show them that they're engaging, reactivate their brain, and bring them back into the content. So they're not just passively staring at the screen. What would you have them do in class? So if it was an actual live lesson, what are some hands-on activities you would have had them do? Again, with manipulatives, with answering questions, Socratic questioning, or discussions. And how can you adapt this to at-home environments? There are a couple different ways you can do this. One is guided analog instruction. I actually did this in my class a lot, both when I was doing distance learning and when I was just trying to flip my classroom within my classroom. I would record a video lesson and I would have my students follow along in analog materials and complete tasks that I would cue them to. So on my dot cam, I would record myself completing something that looked exactly like what they had in front of them. So maybe I'll have just a white piece of paper and I'll cue my students to get a sheet of paper from home, a piece of notebook paper, some counters, and I'll guide them through a we do activity where I'm writing something out on my screen and I'm having them follow along in real time and doing what they see on the screen using whatever is on their table as well. And they can pause, rewind, move forward. And I did this with my students as young as pre-K and as old as my graduate students. You would just adjust the developmental level of what you're doing on the screen to make sure that they're able to do it on their own as well. The next piece is guided digital interaction. And I can do that using my Google Jamboard, which you can find in your G Suite Google Drive and Google Classroom. And I'm going to actually model that for you right now. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to my Google Drive and I'm going to click the new button on the upper left-hand corner. It says Rainbow Plus. And I'm going to come down in my menu and select More. And hidden in the More menu are some really great G Suite tools that a lot of people don't notice because it's down here in the More drop down. And I'm going to click on Google Jamboard. Now, if you've never seen Google Jamboard, it's that interactive whiteboard I keep talking about, and I just love it. What's great about this is that I can come in here and I can set up a jam or a Jamboard that my students can interact with me right now live. So I can have 2 students on this Jamboard, up to 50 students. I don't recommend 50, it can get really noisy in a single jam, but multiple students interacting here at once. And we can all be clicking on our pen and drawing in real time. So if I were to share this with someone else, then that other person could jump into this jam and they could be interacting in it again with me. And the way that that looks is it shows their name in the upper next to their cursor, and I can see who's jamming with me on that board at the same time, which is again really quite nice to do. So if I were to come over here and share this with my Google account, and I was to send this over to my other me, then other me can jump on and I can be jamming live with myself, but let's just pretend I'm another student for the purpose of this. And I can jump in and you can see here, if you can see the little icon, that's my picture. So as I'm writing things in here, you can see who's writing and when. And then I can come over here and I can respond to that other person, who in this case is me. I can erase some content. I can also put in sticky notes. Hello, other me / pretend students. And and then I can go ahead and post that. And other me can come over here and select it or draw on it or annotate it, which is quite nice. So it's really great to be able to have this interactive space where I could just use it just for me. I don't have to invite anyone else into it. It could just be me by myself teaching a lesson, writing content, doing something that I would do on a dry erase board or chalkboard in my classroom. I can even insert images by doing Google image search or uploading them. Another great thing here is I can create different backgrounds. So I can have dot paper, ruled paper, graph paper, just so many different things that I can do. And you can see up here, I can have different slides, if you will, or different frames that I can click through. So as a teacher, I can set up a jam and I can actually share it with my students ahead of time. So I can come to my Google Classroom and I can create an assignment. And I can call that assignment math lesson jam. And I can say, when you hear me give you this instruction, join this jam and follow my lead. And then I can assign it to the class. I can assign a different jam to different students. So I can assign one jam to Asha, a different jam to Jalen, a different to Kyung. I can, even when I come here and attach the jam from Google Drive, so I go to my Drive, I select the jam. I can change it so that every student gets their own copy, or I can break it into different groups. So like groups of 5 students are on the same jam. Then I can go ahead and assign it. And then when I'm teaching my lesson, I can say, all right, boys and girls, learners, students, go to classroom now and open the jam I shared with you. Press pause on my video and draw what do you think the next step will be. So perhaps I'm teaching a lesson around a scientific phenomenon, or I'm teaching an AP US history lesson, and I drew a timeline in the jam, and I want the students to fill in the rest of the timeline. I can say to the students, pause the video, open the jam that you find in Google Classroom, and finish the timeline you see there. When you're done, come back to the video. Then I can literally have a timer on the screen where I can have the students pause, and I can say to the students, all right, here's the timer. Did you come back? And put in a countdown timer that I can find from YouTube. All I did here was type in YouTube 10-second timer, found one, dropped it into my slide deck right here. I just changed the outline for it a little bit so that it was a nice blue outline, so it looks nice and pretty. You don't have to make it pretty like that. But I wanted to give my students time so they can see, like, hey, I'm serious. I really want you to pause and go do this. So I'm putting a timer on the screen so that you know I'm not joking around. I want you to take this time to go and have some interaction. You can use Jamboard in this. It doesn't have to be Jamboard, though. You could use slides, docs, sheets, Drive, lots of different digital tools you can find in that G Suite Google Drive menu, and assign through Classroom so that students can interact in real time through a guided digital interaction on your video. The last is a stop and pause interaction that doesn't involve writing at all. So I might say, all right, boys and girls, I just shared with you a really impactful moment in, world history. Pause your video now and take 10 seconds to think about what would you have done in that situation. Then I come over here to my timer, I pause, I say to my students, pause your video now. Have you paused your video yet? All right, pause now and think. So I can use that countdown timer as like a, hey, you have 10 seconds to pause your video. Or I don't even have to tell my students to pause. I can put in a longer countdown timer, like a 30 or 60-second countdown timer, and say, take 30 seconds to think, and like just have the timer up on the screen counting down. And this is just a YouTube video embedded in my slides that's counting down and giving my students a visual cue to say, hey, really, stop and think. The other thing I can have them stop and pause and do is some actual movements. So I can put that timer up on the screen or tell them to pause, and I could say, walk around your house and count how many windows do you have. And this was actually a scavenger hunt I did with my family on a hangout the other night. We weren't able to see each other in 3D because we're social distancing. So we had an extended family Sunday supper where we all put our devices up, got our meals ready, and we played a little scavenger hunt during dinner. And my brother-in-law said, all right, everyone, we're going to do a competition. How many windows do you have in your house? We all pressed, mute. We all walked around the house, counted, and we came back. It was so much fun. So you can pause and say to your students, measure out the square footage of the room that you're in for maybe a math lesson or for a social studies lesson. Like, go find out what your, great-grandmother's maiden name was, or ask everyone in your house what their favorite food is to do a survey and collect some data. So a great way to do some actual movement. And then a final one I like to do is taking a selfie. Students love taking selfies. A lot of times they're accessing content on mobile phones or devices, tablets. So I might say to them, like, take a selfie of yourself with some work that you just did, or from a space in your home where you're feeling, safest. Again, privacy is important here. So understanding the ramifications of students taking photos of themselves or photos of the interior of the home is important. But if it's appropriate and there are no negative legal ramifications, even having them take pictures in that stop and pause interaction could be nice as well. So a stop and think, an analog movement activity, or taking a photo of something can other be ways to like stop and pause that interaction. And embedding timers into your slide deck can allow you that actual time to tell your students, hey, I really mean it. I want you to interact with this content, so I'm not just viewing and passively consuming this video. So some other things that you want to do in step 5, now that we have begun to plan the interaction, is to prep the materials. So at this point, I know what I'm teaching. I've chunked it into smaller pieces. I've planned my assessment, so I know where I'm going with this lesson and how I'm teaching to know that my students are picking up what I'm putting down. I've begun to plan or develop that interaction to make sure that my students aren't just passively staring at a screen. And now I'm about to record, but before I do that, I want to make sure all my materials are ready. So first, I need to pre-create those slides. So again, for those of you who had interactive whiteboards in your classrooms, it's no different than what you were doing before. You're just building your instructional slides before you teach the lesson. I'm setting up those Jamboards ahead of time. So if I need to like start a timeline for my history lesson, if I want to create that graph paper and like create my X and Y axis, start by showing the first couple steps of a scientific process. Take screenshots of a shared reading or a piece of text I want my students to have a digital Socratic seminar on. Get all that ready. If I'm doing my doc cam using my phone or my tablet, get my physical materials ready. Get those beakers of water, that get my permanent marker and my paper, my slate ready to go, so I'm ready to record. Then clean up your desktop, close your windows, turn off notifications. What I mean by that is if I'm going to be sharing my screen and I'm recording, it can get messy if I don't share the correct screen and I accidentally go to that like Amazon cart or my online shopping cart where I'm like, oh no, now everyone knows that I'm, buying 400 rolls of toilet paper. Like, I don't want people to see that. Or, oh, I don't want my students to see that personal photo that is the desktop image background or the file folders that I have. So make sure that you're cleaning anything up on your screen that you don't want to accidentally show in the video. Of course, you might not be doing it live like I am. You might be recording it ahead of time. So you could always re-record, but it's so stressful when you've recorded a really great lesson and at the last second something happens and you need to re-record the whole thing. The other thing is snoozing your notifications. You want to make sure all your pop-up notifications are gone. You turn off your ringer. Just like set the scene for success. Again, building your lesson content means setting up that Jamboard or creating those Google Slides in advance and just making sure that you have ready what you need to have just to save time. Because again, if we're trying to create these short 3-minute lessons, you don't want to be building the content during the video lesson. If you can be kind of like that Food Network, cooking show where I put the pie into the oven raw and then I already have a pre-cooked one that I can pull out. Oh, wow, the magic of television. I have it all ready to go so I can save some time in my video. Now, finally, it's time to record your video. So find a quiet space. For me, I have no quiet space. I don't know if you can see behind me, but there's no door on this room. This is a loft. So this opens up into my family room, which opens up into my kitchen, which opens up into the hallways. And then I have, the 2 bedrooms in the back of the room. My husband and my 18-month-old daughter are so supportive of me. They are playing blocks right now in my daughter's room quietly with the door closed. And I said, give me 55 minutes of quiet. So they're giving me that time. So for you, find that quiet space. If it's negotiating with the people who live with you or animals that live with you for quiet space, have that conversation so you can record. Have a headphone with mic if you can, if it's available. I didn't have one available today, but if you do, sometimes that can help with some of the sound. And then get ready to meet with yourself. Like I said, bandwidth, all of that, you might want to check that. I turned off Wi-Fi on all of my devices in my house before I began this call. So like my phone turned off Wi-Fi. I have another laptop over here. I turned off Wi-Fi. So I just was trying to conserve my internet so I could be ready to have as much internet juice as possible to create this. And again, when you're done, then you end up with a video lesson. And again, I didn't use any screencasting software to create this lesson that you see here, this video. Everything you see here, I did by doing a Hangout Meet, a Google Hangout with myself, sharing my screen and just recording the Hangout by clicking on the little buttons to record. And again, the way that you record a Hangout is going to meet.google.com. I start a new Hangout. I wait for my, I just said that I tried to buffer all of my internet, and here we go. Okay, here we go. So I go here, I click join or start a meeting. I then go in here and I can just name it whatever I want. It doesn't matter what I name it. It's not really going to show up. Then I can go ahead and get ready. When I join it, it's going to allow me these three little buttons on the bottom right. And one of the options, once I join, let's go ahead and join. One of the options once I join are going to be the same three little buttons down in this lower right-hand corner. And what that's going to allow me to do is record. And this is a premium feature of Meet that's available right now for all EDU users due to the COVID-19 crisis. But again, I can come over here and one of the options you'll see is record, which I don't have right now on this account. I don't have it enabled, but for those of you who are in your G Suite for Education accounts, you'll see record as an option. All right. So let's keep on keeping on. And I promised you now that the next thing I was going to do was show you how to build those assessments. So as we're trying to assess for student understanding, we want to make sure that we allow our students to show what they know, and so that we know, was that video lesson successful? So the first one is creating a quiz in Google Forms. This is really great because it's quick to complete. It's that quick exit ticket, dipstick check for understanding that we have often done in our classrooms. And you can make it auto-graded only for forced choice answers. So I can't do like a paragraph text and have that auto-graded. That AI is not available quite yet. But you can do for any first choice, like multiple choice, check boxes, fill in the blank type things. So let's go ahead and try that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to my Google Drive, and I am going to click New. I'm going to go to that wonderful More drop-down so that I can get to Google Forms. And then I can, obviously you'd want to title it, so I can call this Math Quiz. And for those of you who aren't math teachers, you can do this for any subject. I just happen to be a math teacher, so I always default to math thinking. Of course, you'll want to make sure that you have your student's name. Always want your students to write their name on their paper, so I can say student name. If you want to be able to sort it, you might want to do first name and then last name as separate questions, so you can sort by last name. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'll do last name, first name. I don't know if you noticed, but it auto magically changed to short answer. It was originally multiple choice, but when I did first name, it used artificial intelligence to sense that I want a short answer, so it changed. But if I don't like what that is, I can change the answer type here in the drop down. I clicked required because I do not want my students to submit it without their name. I can also, in the settings up here, restrict the users to the people in my organization and collect their email address. That's really helpful, so students can't, let's just say, be less than honest and submit an answer for someone else. So I can't write Joe's name on my paper. It will collect my email address that I'm logged into, so it really knows it's that real student. Then I can go ahead and write the question. So I can say, what is 2 plus 2? Right? And then I can do multiple choice. I can say, actually, let's do 2 plus 1. I can say 2 plus 1 is 3. 2 plus 1 is 2. Maybe they'll do multiplication instead of addition. 2 plus 1 is 1. Maybe they'll do subtraction instead of multiplication. 2 plus 1 is 21. Maybe they'll just combine the digits instead of actually doing it. And again, I want them to answer this question, so I'm going to make it required. Maybe they'll do a bonus question like, what was difficult about that question for you? Maybe, and maybe I'll make this one optional, so I will not check required in case they don't have anything that's difficult. Now I want this to be auto-graded. So in my upper right-hand corner, I can click my spoke, and I can turn this into a quiz by clicking the quiz menu, and I can click make this a quiz. So then I can release the grade immediately after manual review. That's if I want to have longer response questions that I want to grade as a person. And I can show what the students can see when they get the grade. Once I select that, now I get a new option when I'm editing, and you see I have answer key down here. So I can click answer key, And I can give this question points. Maybe this one's worth 1 point, maybe it's worth 3. And I can tell which one is the correct answer. I can say they're all correct, or actually just this one's correct. I can even give answer feedback. So I can say for the incorrect answer, like, check your operations. Did you add, subtract, multiply, or multiply? And I can even add a link or a video, a YouTube video, to have it to reteach. So maybe this is the second lesson, and I can add a link to a video where I first taught this concept so they can rewatch that lesson. Again, another great reason why you want to keep your lessons to like 3-minute chunks so that it's a quick 3-minute refresher in case they get that one wrong. So they get that immediate feedback. Then as a teacher, I can see responses here, which will show up as graphs, and there's great data readouts. Or if I click this little green icon here, I can create a spreadsheet, and it will show me in spreadsheet format all of the students' responses, and it gives me their grade as well. Now that's for a Google form. Now I can also do a rubric-based assessment in Classroom. So what that means is maybe I want to have something a little bit more in depth than a quick Google form, and I want to assign a Google Doc activity for them where they write an essay or they create you know, a how-to guide, a slide deck where they do a presentation, a spreadsheet where they actually are doing calculations, maybe in my math, algebra, and econ class. Maybe I want them to create a timeline in Google Drawings or do a Jamboard, or maybe I want them even to create their own video. All of these are options to do more project-based, performance-based learning in Google Classroom, and I can assign an actual rubric to it. Now, this is great because it's that deeper assessment of knowledge. It's oftentimes more engaging, but know a couple things. One, these don't self-assess. You'll have to go in and manually grade it yourself using your rubric. And two, it obviously takes more time. So if this was just a 3-minute video, then know that the amount of time you need to add to actually watch the video is the 3 minutes plus any interactivity you had throughout the video, and then the time it takes to complete this assessment. So the way that you would do this is you'd go to Google Classroom. So I'd go to classroom.google.com. And then I'd go to my classroom and I would click on it. Then I can click on classwork, which is one of the menu items on the top. I can click create, and I can do assignment. I can also do quizzes in here too. And I can call this, you know, math lesson assessment. But at the bottom here, I can put instructions here, la la la, tra la la, quack quack quack. I can attach the template from Drive of what I want them to do. So I can say, you know, make a copy of this Jamboard, of this drawing, of this slide deck. So I can create templates here. When I attach the template, I can make it so that every student can edit it. So this means all 20 or 200 of your students are editing the exact same file. Or if I click this last one, make a copy, it's creating a new copy for each student and sharing it with you so they create their own file. But then I can down here click on rubric, and I can either create, reuse, or import a rubric that I built in Google Sheets. Let's create one. So I can call this maybe a participation guide. Maybe I just want them to have a discussion. And then I can say, let's see here, questions asked. For the description, I can say how many points. So points 1, 2, 3. Level title will be no questions. Level 2 would be some questions. And maybe level 3 would be lots of questions. Pedagogically, not the best rubric ever, but you get the idea, educators. I don't have to teach you how to write a rubric, but essentially then I can write it more of a descriptive language here. And then when I click save, then I have this rubric attached to this assignment. When I click assign, then the students can see the rubric so they know how they're being assessed. But then as the teacher, when I go in to actually grade their assessment or grade their lesson, I can come over here and I can see the students. I can go to Asha student. I can look at what she turned in, but then I can also grade it here, and I have the rubric right here for me to select her points, and I can add comments and feedback as well. So that's very nice. Now, after you've created your assessments and decided, like, am I doing a quick exit ticket or am I doing a deeper dive into kind of that performance assessment, you want to post your lesson. So I have my video lesson ready. I have my assessment all built. How can I do it? I can upload it to Drive, which is really nice because it allows your students the ability to download it. So for those of your students who don't have all the time access to internet, it's really great because then in the times that they do have internet access, they can download it to that mobile device, or if they're tethering off of it, that's really nice. The thing that you want to think about here is maybe you have no plans to share this lesson more widely. I just want it for me and my students, and I don't ever want the rest of the world to see it. I'm not there yet. The second is uploading it to YouTube. Now for this one, it's a lot harder / impossible to have your kids download it. There are ways, but not recommended. But there are a lot of pros to uploading it to YouTube. One is YouTube captioning, which is really great. So I can have YouTube caption my my lesson for my students who are deaf or hard of hearing or have English language learning or whatever the main language you're teaching in, a language barrier to understanding. I can also pay this forward and share it to my wider community. So if I want to share this forward and I want to contribute to other educators in my subject area or parents, I can post it on YouTube, which makes it great because then someone else who needs a lesson on, main idea and details or, the Civil War can go on and find that lesson and reuse it. And finally, the ease of viewing on mobile is often a lot easier on YouTube. So for parents, families who are accessing this for their students on mobile devices, YouTube sometimes is a much easier place to have it, and you can create channels and playlists. And of course, once you have it in YouTube or Drive, then you add that YouTube or Google Drive link to Google Classroom so students can access it easily and they're not looking in lots of different places for your video lesson. So you're just adding it directly as an assignment to Google Classroom, and then you can attach the assessment to the video link as well. Now, I want to end with 3 quick tips for sustainable practice. We're hearing more and more that this is not going to end anytime soon. Distance learning for a lot of places, and some states have even announced that it's going to be like this through the rest of the school year. So we want to make sure that creating these instructional videos or these instruction videos for your students or learning videos is something you can maintain as a teacher and you don't burn out. So a couple of tips. 1, keep it real. And what I mean by that is speak as naturally as possible to your students. You don't have to get an affect of, this is my video voice and I have my radio persona and this is how I speak when I'm teaching. You can just be natural. If you use, more informal language with your students, as long as it's, professionally appropriate, speak like that to your kids as well. That's okay. And know that it's perfectly fine as you're keeping it real, that it's not going to be perfect. You heard my buzzer rang, my super obnoxious apartment buzzer rang. We had a point where my screen came off and I had to ask my friend Jess, who's one of the Googler wizards behind the curtain, helping with this today to bring my video back on. You can hear my daughter not enjoying her block activity with her father downstairs right now. I'm not going to reshoot this. It's 1 take, I'm done, because you don't reshoot your lessons in real life. When you're teaching in front of your students live, face-to-face in 3D, and you make a mistake, you can't undo say. You can't delete, rewind, and retake that class period. If I had $1 for every mistake I made in front of my class live, I would be a billionaire. And I would just give free Wi-Fi to all the students out there who need it. A trillionaire. But that's just not the case. And we shouldn't hold ourselves to this higher level of expectation because we're digital now. So if you don't feel comfortable with creating a video lesson that you're afraid has mistakes in it and will be around forever, just save it in Drive. Let your students watch it, and then at the end of the unit, at the end of that semester, delete all those videos and they're gone. So keep it real and don't expect too much of yourself. Mistakes are not only okay, they're expected. Your cat will walk across your keyboard and we'll all be like that newscaster we saw in the news a few years back where his daughter dances to the back of his background. We're all working from home. We're all juggling a lot. Don't try and make it perfect because you'll never, ever, ever get through this. I really would encourage you to take 1 take for each video and no more than that. 2, keep it short. 3-minute videos makes this sustainable because a 3-minute video will actually take you 30 minutes to an hour to create. It takes a lot longer to create that content. So keep it short and then it'll take less time. If you want to create a 60-minute video, that'll take you hours to create. So 3 minutes or less is best. Keep it accessible. So think about how you're creating lots of windows of access for all of your different students and making sure they have equitable access to learning. Save it in Drive so they can download it offline. Think about your slides. Can they be downloaded as a PDF that families can print if they have a printer at home, if they really just don't have access to the video? So if they can't watch you live stream it, can your slides be explanatory enough where the kids can just download the slide deck and see your speaker notes and just get that? And then use Google Slides captions. If you have Google Slides captions on, which I'll show you right now, if I come over here and I turn those on, oops, and I come over to my presents and I click down on my presenter menu down here. Wait for it, buffering, internet is fun. And I click down here on captions. This is what I was showing you before, where it live captions what I'm saying on my slides through the slide software itself so that students who are deaf, of hard of hearing, or have English language challenges can still see the content. And eventually, this gray bar that you see, the toolbar, will go away, but my internet's buffering right now, so that's why it's acting kind of funky. To remind you, we have these two great links to learn more, g.co/teachfromhome and g.co/edu/COVID-19. And I'm just going to take a couple minutes to go to questions. So I see here, go ahead and throw your questions in if you haven't already, but Bill had a question from earlier. He wanted to for me to show you what permissions I use to set up the meeting. Guest camera off, guest audio off. In this instance, Bill, there are no guests. It's just me in a Hangout meet by myself. So I literally just went to meet.google.com, started a new meet. I didn't even put it in my calendar. I didn't put it in Classroom. I just started a meet from a new browser tab window and just joined it just me. When I added a second device, that was me too, just on 2 devices. One was on my computer and one was on my phone. I did mute and turn off the sound on my computer when I had my phone ad, so I didn't get that annoying feedback noise of 2 microphones trying to be in the same Hangout in the same room. I hope that answers that question for you. So I don't see any other questions coming up from our team here. Oh, here comes another one from Jess. Thank you, Jess. Again, we have that group of amazing Googlers who are behind the scenes answering questions live. So Jess was saying, another question from the audience is, can I break students in a class into groups and provide a Jamboard for each group? Or is it one Jamboard for each lesson? Great question. Unfortunately, right now in Google Classroom, you can't do groups within a single classroom. However, I was using Google Classroom as an educator myself before I joined Google. And what I would do is I would create separate classrooms for each class. So I had one classroom, one Google Classroom for all 200 students. And then I had separate classrooms for groups of 5 to 10 students, my differentiated groups, if you will, or my small working groups. And I just would create a new classroom, like small group A, small group B, the parrots, the cougars, the tigers. And then I would have those links in the Google Classroom class, and I would say, go to your group to find your Jamboard. So while you can't do it natively within Google Classroom, you can create a separate classroom for each small group and one classroom for the whole group and link to them from your classroom. Great question. So we're all out of time for today. I hope that this helped you step-by-step think through how you will create engaging, interactive video lessons for your students, and know that this is a marathon, not a sprint. To give yourself grace and permission to not be perfect. As educators, we're not only teaching the world's students right now from home, many of us are caregivers to our own students, our children, to family members, or you're just trying to cope with the change in society and handling this as a professional and an individual and a human being. So we don't need to be perfect. We're all at level 0 together. And if we come together as a community and give ourselves space and grace to be imperfect and to learn together, I know we'll get through this together. Much gratitude for all of you doing this work. I hope that we at Google for Education can continue to be supportive to all of you. Stay safe, stay well, and as always, don't forget to wash your hands. Thank you, everyone.